Hi, I'm Ben, and me and Kylie are going to talk to you about grand juries and due process. Let's head over to Kylie for the grand jury story.
There are 5 parts to the Fifth Amendment. They are the Grand Jury Clause, Double Jeopardy Clause, Due Process Clause, Self-Incrimination Clause, and the Eminent Domain Clause. There are 2 major parts that we will be talking about today. Those clauses are the Grand Jury Clause. In this book, it will explain what grand juries are, and some of the very fun facts about grand juries, and how they came about. Once upon a time, there were these systems called grand juries. They have been here for more than 100 years. These grand juries have been traced back to the times of the Norman conquest of England in 1066. Now, the jury certainly did not live up to its name, because there are more jurors than in a trial jury. The jurors that were in the jury had to take an oath to promise that they would carry out their duties faithfully as long as they served on the jury. There were about 12 to 23 members on a jury, with a majority vote to accuse someone of a very bad crime. Now, a long time ago, after 1066, the first grand jury that was actually put in place was in 1635 and was in Massachusetts, which looked into cases such as murder, robbery, and housewife beating. But in 1700, the value of the grand jury was recognized as opposing the royalists. Grand juries around 1765 had expressed their power by refusing to indict leaders of the Stamp Act. They also, in the same year, refused charges for the Boston Gazette. Back in 1770, in Philadelphia, a grand jury had opposed British taxes. They proposed new laws, protected against abuses in government, and wielded the tremendous authority in their power to determine who should and who should not face trial. The Revolutionary grand juries adopted the 14th Amendment, and in 1868 and made it illegal to deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The 14th Amendment isn't required anymore for a grand jury to use, but in California, they still use the 14th Amendment for prosecution to be initialed by either a criminal grand jury indictment or a judicial preliminary hearing. Now let's quickly go over to California's grand jury. Did you know that the first California penal codes contained statutes providing for a grand jury to be impaneled quarterly? At the same time, trial juries were drawn. The grand juries looked over local prisons, conducted audits of county books, and pursued matters of county interest. The grand jury in 1880 are allowed to investigate and anything beyond misconduct of public officials. Only California and Nevada induct new grand jury members every year, so they can watch over the county government. Now, you're probably wondering what grand juries really do. Grand juries basically bring up charges to people who are believed to have committed very bad crimes. In the federal system and in some other states, they can bring up a felony charges. Once the grand jury brings up a criminal charge, it is put in an indictment. If the prosecutor wants to charge someone, they can start presenting evidence. Evidence can be from anything from a person to lab testing, such as DNA. All evidence is presented to the grand jury, but then there's this thing called double jeopardy. For a person to have been put into jeopardy, the basic rule is that jeopardy attaches when a witness is sworn in the trial to court. Grand juries also investigate either as a part of bringing criminal charges or as purely separate functions. There are two kinds. Grand juries also investigate either as part of bringing criminal charges or as purely separate functions. There are two kinds of juries in the federal system. They are the regular grand juries and the special grand juries. The regular grand juries are primarily deciding whether to bring charges. The special grand juries is called into existence to investigate whether organized crimes is occurring in the community. Now, organized crime is a business supplying illegal goods or services. Special federal grand juries investigate and establish the organized crime. Is the grand jury can charge the individual responsible for the organized crime or can issue a report describing that what has been going on. A number of states follow common law practice and use grand juries to investigate things other than crime, such as conditions in the community dealing with road, bridges, and other community affairs. The process of the grand jury is private and secret. Here are some quick things to remember about grand juries. First, they typically have 23 members, and 16 of the 23 are for quorum. A quorum is the minimum of members of an assembly that must be present to make a meeting valid. Their time in office is usually about 18 to 2 years. The defendants are entitled to be present at the proceedings. No one is allowed to cross-examine the witness on the defendant's behalf. Information presented to the grand jury is presented by prosecuting lawyers. The grand jury has broad investigative powers. Based on an indictment, the court causes an arrest warrant to be issued. The individual then appears before the district court to answer the charges and enter a plea of an arraignment. Now you may be wondering how much power the judicial branch has when it comes to grand juries. There are three magical reasons why the judicial branch has given Congress complete control over regulating military, states, and country. The first magical reason is that the framers do not want a handful of unelected judges to have power over the military, who might use it for personal advantage. The second magical reason is to ensure the military would remain strong. And the third and final magical reason is that it would be very unwise to allow courts and judges who are far removed from the scenes of war to determine what proper action on the battlefield. The grand juries finally understood everything about themselves, and they lived happily ever after.
Well, that was exciting. Now, let's talk a little bit about due process. Now, due process ensures citizens that the state must respect all the legal rights owed to a person. This includes rights such as freedom of speech and the right to education. Now let's ask some people some questions.
Oh, yeah?
Do you know what
burn.
Can you tell me what due process is and what it does for a citizen?
Well, all I can think of is those scatter kids, you know? Those cops. They'd be able to beat up on them all the time without due process. That would be great!
Thank you!
Yeah!
Yo, Vinny.
Yeah. Ugh. I just lost.
Sorry to hear that.
No big deal.
I want to know if you could tell me what due process does for you as a citizen.
Well, I'm only 12 years old, and I don't go to school that much. But what I can tell you is, without due process, I wouldn't be able to go to school. I ain't good enough for that anyway.
Okay.
See ya.
See ya. Jeff, can you tell me about due process and how it affects your daily life?
Well, let me answer that question of yours with one other question. That question is, what would you do if they were trying to take away your freedom? Now, without freedom, we as a society would not have been able to have lifted this great nation to great lengths and great sizes and great shoes without the use of camera phones and helicopters and Sasquatch. Now think about that. How many times a day do you honestly use the telephone? When you got a telephone, you gotta make tons and tons of broccoli soda. Broccoli soda is one of the honestly, I feel like it has shaped this great nation to what it has become today without any of those high-tech shoes and carpenters and doctors and liquor stores and Cadillacs. Now, have I answered your question?
Well, sure. Thanks.
I'll see you around.
Bye. Hey guys, do you think you guys can tell me about due process and how it affects you as a citizen?
Well, honestly, all I have to say is that it affects us because without that, the court system would not function the way that they should. People would not have a fair trial. I mean, the court system would be ridiculous. You'd have police being capable of saying things such as, he committed a crime that he did not commit. You'd have people barging into people's houses even though they didn't have warrants. These are some of the things that really affect us as a society. And if you don't see that, then that just doesn't make any sense. I mean, honestly, it's helped us with so many things. Proper court systems, the right to not be beaten by some of the thugs in society, such as police officers who have been treating some of these citizens in the improper manners. We would not be allowed to have the kinds of educations that we deserve. We all have the right to have an education such as me. Honestly, people want to see the education levels that I have reached. I have a 4.0 in every single subject. But they have the right to try.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes!
Can you tell me what the community would be like without due process?
Without due process, I wouldn't be able to say what I want to say. I wouldn't be capable of insulting the enemy right in front of his face. And when he comes at me, I could kill him. And after killing him, I would go to prison. But even though I'm going to prison, I would be allowed to be given the proper rights that society has said that I deserve as a citizen of the United States. This is what happens when you're given due process. Yeah!
Now, these weren't the best answers, but some of them were true, for the most part. Due process keeps us safe from police brutality, allows us our freedom of speech, our right to speedy trial, education, all of our rights. It's defined as a legal requirement that the state must respect all of the legal rights owed to a person. With that being said, your rights are protected.